So welcome, fellow Rotarians and guests. It's my great pleasure to introduce the president of Pelotonia, Joe Apgar, today. I'm sure you know, but Pelotonia was established in 2008 to fund life-saving cancer research. And on a personal matter, Pelotonia has meant a lot to me as I've ridden for, this will be my 15th year. As my father was diagnosed with lymphoma, I had a melanoma, my brother-in-law died of lung cancer, my sister-in-law is a survivor of breast cancer. So cancer hits everybody, and Pelotonia is doing something tangible to address the problem. In Joe's role as president, he's responsible for leading all aspects of Pelotonia's operations and ensuring the success of the organization's strategic plan. I first met Joe by phone in 2020 when he reached out to me personally to hear any concern I might have about riding in Pelotonia during the pandemic, and to assure me that they would have measures in place for riding during to keep Pelotonia going during the pandemic. And they did. We had a virtual ride and it was done safely. Although 2020 was a difficult year, as I think you'll see in Joe's presentation, Pelotonia has survived due in part to such personal care that it gives to each and every one of its riders. Pelotonia is that kind of organization, and Joe is that kind of man. Joe himself is a cancer survivor and was diagnosed with testicular cancer during his senior year in college. Joe began riding and fundraising for Pelotonia after being declared cancer-free. After graduating from Penn State University with a degree in finance, he spent 8 years working at Rockbridge Capital. And while at Rockbridge, Joe is a member of the founding team of RTRX, a 3-day leadership experience initially launched as an event for the hospitality industry to support cancer research. Today, RTRX now raises more than $500,000 a year for Pelotonia. Joe previously served as the Chief Operating Officer at Pelotonia, where he focused on leading the organization's day-to-day operations, community engagement, event planning, technology, and marketing. Prior to this role, he focused on strategic fundraising and operational initiatives aimed at the growing reach of the Peloton community. So Joe was named to the 40 under 40 class of 2020 by Columbus Business First, and the Future 50 class of 2021 by Columbus CEO Magazine. Joe was selected as a member of the 2022 Young American Leaders Program at Harvard Business School, with 9 other young, high-impact leaders from Columbus. He's a passionate advocate for adoption and young adult cancer survivorship, and he speaks frequently about the importance of cancer research, advocacy, survivorship, and the unique challenges faced by adolescent and young adult survivors. So Joe lives here in Columbus with his wife Jill and his daughter Cora. Now there's a couple of things here that are a little bit off of his official biography. So Joe's experience with cancer actually extends beyond his own personal one when his sister was diagnosed with cancer at a young age. And Joe's interests extend beyond Pelotonia and bike riding. He's a serious collector of baseball cards. So if anyone is interested to speak to him about that, maybe a little horse trading can go on here. And when not riding or collecting or organizing things and making sure Pelotonia runs smoothly, you might find Joe at his favorite restaurant, Roosters. After all, according to their marketing, it's a fun, casual place. So ladies and gentlemen, Joe Apgar.
Thank you, John, for that. That was a great intro. I'm curious where you picked up some of those tidbits. I think I might know, but well, thank you all for having me. I'm excited to just come and share a lot of what a lot of you in this room have made possible by participating, by donating, by volunteering in Pelotonia, but really what the Columbus community has made possible over the last 15 years. I think it's no small statement to say Pelotonia would not exist in a lot of other cities. Columbus is really, really unique in the way it has just sort of grasped this organization and really, taken it as one of its own. And I'm excited to share some of the stats with you. So the first thing I want to do is share our what we call our hype video for the year, which gives you a little flavor of what the event was like this past year in 2022.
15 years ago, a group of people came together to try something new, something bold, defining, transformational, something with a singular mission. Rallying a community to help end cancer. The result? An unstoppable, life-saving movement called Pelotonia. Since the first ride in 2009, Pelotonia has inspired a community to raise funds that accelerate innovative cancer research at the OSU CCC James. 40,000 riders, volunteers, and challengers. 680,000 donors. $260 million raised, all in support of breakthrough ideas from the brightest cancer researchers in the world, bringing us all closer to a future that's cancer-free. Thanks to your boundless passion, generosity, and commitment to one goal. Together, we've accomplished more than anyone could have imagined, and we're just getting started. 15 years, one goal. Pelotonia 2023.
I just want to spend my time today talking about a couple things. One, I want to share just the history and the origin of the organization for those who don't know that story. And I want to spend most of the time today talking about where the money goes and what the money's doing and the work and the impact that it's having. And then we're going to end with a little bit of, if anyone's on the fence about participating or riding, I want to show you some stuff about our 2023 event that will hopefully get you over the hurdle. So we've raised more than $258 million. And I think one of the unique things about Pelotonia is this is $258 million that the community has raised. And 100% of that has gone to cancer research. So that is one of the founding principles of Pelotonia, was that we would be set up and organized with this 100% model. And if you slide to the next slide. So these are our annual results. You can see John mentioned, 2020 we had a virtual ride. We were actually one of the 3 largest virtual events in the country in 2020. And I think nothing sort of screamed how great the Columbus community was than 2020, when we didn't have a physical event and our community came out and still raised almost $11 million. The original goal of Pelotonia was actually to raise $35 million. It was very defined, and I had a chance last year to see sort of the original business plan of Pelotonia, and it was, if we could raise $35 million in 7 years, this will be one of the fastest growing, largest grassroots fundraising organizations in the country. It'll have a tremendous impact on cancer research. And you can see in the first 7 years, we actually raised about $100 million. And it blew away everybody's expectations far and wide. And since then, we've been really fortunate. We are one of the 5 largest single event fundraisers in North America at the grassroots level. And so that's where people are out sort of asking friends and family for money. On the next slide, you'll see what makes this 100% commitment, this 100% of the community raised dollars possible, is that we have a handful of organizations that support our operations. And so these are the companies that support our staff, putting on the event, our safety, hiring all the police, everything that we do for Ride Weekend, all the marketing you see throughout town throughout the year. These organizations help make it possible so that when all of you go out and ask friends and family for money, you can stand there and say that every single dollar that you're giving is going directly to cancer research at the James, which is really special. So the next couple slides I want to share just some really fun things and dive a little bit into where this money's going. $258 million is a lot of money, and we're fortunate to, where we're standing, be right down the street from what is the 3rd largest cancer hospital in North America, soon to be the 2nd largest cancer hospital in North America once that big tower gets built in a couple of years. They're adding about 200 beds to the cancer hospital through that large tower. But one of the really big initiatives that we fund is something called Pelotonia Idea Grants. And so I think a really helpful way to understand why idea grants are important is first to understand that our government, like a lot of governments around the globe, our government is the largest funder of cancer research in our country. And so the NCI gives, anywhere between $6 and $7 billion of grants all through the nation for cancer researchers. And what they're really focused on at a government level is funding things that they feel like have a high degree of success or chance of working. They cannot afford to use government dollars on projects that don't pan out, sort of in simple form. Well, one of the tricks with research, and one of the things that's really hard, is to figure out if something's viable and working. You need money to get it started and seed funding. And so idea grants are in a lot of ways sort of, venture capital seed funding to get an idea started. And so it's a group or a team of researchers that has an idea. They don't know if it's going to work, but they need to get the data started, the project started, and things kicked off. And so we funded $26 million worth of these grants, so almost 200 different idea grant projects. 46 of them have been carried forward and funded by the NCI, which is, when I tell you that getting funded by the NCI is hard, it is extremely difficult. And for us to have almost a 25% rate of our projects going to the next step is absolutely tremendous. So that's the first area of things we're really focused on funding. The second one, the fellowship program, is it's one of my favorite because of the way it impacts people, and particularly young people. So one of the things happening in academic science and academic medicine is it's hard and it's challenging, and it takes a long time to build your career. It takes a long time to get grants and to go through school and postdoctoral stuff. And what ends up happening is a lot of really great, smart people with tons of potential leave because they can't afford it. They can't afford to stay in school. They might not have come from, a background or an upbringing with means to stay in medical school. And they end up leaving for a job to go make money to support themselves and support their family. And so we started this fellowship program that keeps these young people focused on academic research and science. And so these are 2-year, basically, scholarships that help fund a student to be in a lab of a researcher at the James and pursue really whatever passion or idea they have. And I had a chance to meet a fellow yesterday. I was at an event last night, and she, this is actually a pretty wild story. She did a summer fellowship. She spent a summer in a lab with a researcher named Samik Roy Chowdhury, who studies immunology and cancer genetics. The project she worked on in the summer, 2 years ago, is the basis for launching a clinical trial this summer in patients. And that's an idea that a young person had that no one was working on, that we were able to fund, and is now going to be a tangible sort of product in a clinical trial. And it's just, that's how research moves forward. That's how we keep taking steps forward. And so this is far and away, I think, my favorite program. And when you get to meet people that have become fellows, the question I always ask them is, why did you pick cancer research? No one's ever in it for the money. No one's ever in it for the glory. Every single person I've met that's been a Pelotonia fellow wanted to study and pursue cancer research because of something personal that happened to them. And so a parent, themselves, a sibling, a close friend that had their own journey with cancer at some point along their life and has influenced them into this path, and it's really, really special. The next slide is something that I'm really excited about, and these are statewide initiatives. And so these are teams of researchers going out and blanketing our state, working with a network of 50 or 60 hospitals all around the state, and trying to figure out how we can create protocols and best practices among really the state, but also expanding across the country. And a lot of it's focused on prevention. And so, you think about cancer research for years has been just so focused on treatment. I think the real cures long-term come from preventing cancer in the first place. And so we've funded some really exciting things. One is called, one is on lung cancer, so beating lung cancer in Ohio. And then the other is turning the page on breast cancer. And so turning the page on breast cancer is something that we've partnered with Komen Foundation on, and to fund this research, which is sort of really looking at why do certain groups of people have higher incidences of cancer mortality than others, and trying to just get sort of deep into the data of why are certain groups of the population faring worse than others, and what can we do to address that. And so these statewide initiatives are really important, have a much longer lead time of outcomes, but I think ultimately have the chance to impact so many people in our community and beyond. And then the fourth piece I wanted to highlight from an impact standpoint is the Pelotonia Institute for Immuno-Oncology. So anyone that may have been touched by cancer in their own lives or have had a partner, a sibling, a parent go through cancer, historically there's been three sort of modalities of treatment. So one is surgery, you cut out the cancer. Two is radiation, which effectively is burning out the cancer. And three is chemotherapy, which has become more popular in the last decade or two, which is ultimately poisoning the cancer out of your body. And this fourth treatment modality, which is immunotherapy, which is using your own body's immune system to target and ultimately kill the cancer from the inside out. And it's really thought of as sort of this fourth frontier of cancer research and sort of the next treatment modality. There have been including this institute, 7 institutes in North America launched to focus solely on immunotherapy, coming up with treatments, and ultimately launching clinical trials, bringing research labs here. And so we made a $102,265,000 pledge 3 years ago to launch this institute. We've since recruited 100 plus researchers, plus all of their labs to Columbus to study immunotherapy, and they're actually moving into their new home, which is on the next page, which is the Pelotonia Research Center. So if anybody lives around Upper Arlington or drives by Upper Arlington throughout the week, you'll see this is part of West Campus. So there's a big black building going up on the corner of Kenny and Lane. And this will open this summer. And this is one of the first buildings ever on Ohio State's campus that was named in recognition of something, not because somebody paid for the building. So we didn't pay for this building at all. This building was named at the Board of Trustee meeting in February in recognition of the Pelotonia community's efforts in fundraising and all of the impact it's had on campus. And so this is a 5-story building. It will be one of the most state-of-the-art buildings in the world. I've had a chance to tour this throughout the time it's been being built. It's completely brick and concrete, and I live near there, and if we ever have high winds or tornadoes, that's probably where I'm going to go, because that thing is not coming down. But on the second floor, the Pelotonia Institute for Immuno-Oncology is going to move in, and on the third floor, the Center for Cancer Engineering is going to move in. And the Center for Cancer Engineering is something relatively new at the university, which is taking the engineering expertise that Ohio State University has and is known for and bringing it into the cancer program to make tools and treatments for cancer patients, and to really try to explore how can we sort of cross-collaborate and bring that knowledge of engineering into the cancer space to start to influence treatment and ultimately patients. So the next slide. So that's sort of impact, and I'm happy to take questions once I get through this part, and I would love to take questions. I want to just run through a little bit about our 2023 event, all that it entails, and share a little bit about a new event we're actually launching this year. So this year's our 15th year. 15 years is we're well behind the Columbus Rotary Club in terms of age, which I learned, but a lot of nonprofits don't make it 15 years, and I don't think a lot of people appreciate, one, just how hard it is to keep sort of moving forward and seeing progress, but 15 years is a really big milestone for us. And so as you see our branding and our marketing throughout the community this year, you're going to see the number 15 quite a bit. And so I'm going to talk about Ride Weekend, which I think is what most people think of and know of as the Pelotonia event, and then we're launching something new called Gravel Day. So for those of you that have ridden, and for those of you that have ridden for a long time, we're going back to more traditional sort of routes this year from a mileage standpoint. So 24, 50, 77, and 100. The last couple of years we've deviated from this. We had a 57 and we had a 20, and wanted to get back to sort of more on the 25-mile increments. We're going to be finishing back up in Gambier, which is Kenyon College, which is where we've been for about 10 years. It's a really beautiful campus for us to finish on. And the 77 and 100-mile routes will finish up there. The 24-mile route starts in Columbus and finishes in Pickerington, which we had been through Pickerington as a community a few years ago, and I don't know that there's a community that comes out like Pickerington has. And so we're really excited to get back through that community this year. And then we launched something in 2021, which was a Sunday loop route that started and finished in New Albany, and we had no idea if anyone would like it. And last year, almost 1,000 people rode that route, which is pretty incredible. So we've continued that. And then on the next slide, you'll see some of our 2-day options. So for those daring enough that want to, sleep in a dorm room and get on a bike the second day, I'm usually not one of them. I have a really hard time waking up the next day and getting on a bike. But this is a really fun experience for people to ride 2 days. Sunday's a bit of a smaller crowd out on the routes, but you get to ride your bike through Amish country and see horse and buggies, and it's a really, really fun experience. So we've got 160 and 184-mile option, and then we've seen a lot of people add that 37-mile loop on to Saturday routes as well. And now I want to talk about our new event, which is really exciting. So gravel riding, also known as gravel cycling. This is the fastest growing segment of cycling in North America. If you've gone to a bike shop lately, you've probably seen a ton of e-bikes and a ton of gravel bikes. And between those two, that's probably makes up about 70% of what bike stores sell right now. We do allow e-bikes in all of our events. I am a huge fan of e-bikes. I was talking to Dwight earlier. Some of my peers around the country who run other big rides are very cycling purists and are taking a hard stance on the e-bike movement. I'm complete opposite. I think e-bikes open up accessibility and make it more fun for people. And we've seen time and time again people that get diagnosed with cancer sign up for Pelotonia, and the only way they can do 20 miles is to ride an e-bike, and we see it happen every single year, and it's one of the most special things that you can see. And so we love e-bikes, but gravel cycling, and there are gravel e-bikes, e-gravel bikes as well, but gravel cycling is unique. So think about it: dirt roads, stone roads, unkept roads that were paved 15 years ago that just haven't been kept up. In Ohio, we have no oceans, we have no mountains, but we have a ton of dirt roads and unkept roads, especially as you get out to the rural parts. And as we started thinking internally with our team, we really wanted to bring a second event to the community. Our ride weekend event has been a staple and has been so fun, but we just kept hearing that people wanted more and they wanted something new. And so, we looked around and looked at the assets that we had in Ohio, and because it wasn't oceans or mountains, we landed on bringing a gravel ride to the community, and the reception on this has been absolutely amazing. So this is going to be a 30 and a 50-mile loop that'll start and finish down in Nelsonville. So if anybody's been to or familiar with the Nelsonville Music Festival, we're actually going to start and finish on the same property. And so we're working with the property owners and the people that put on that music festival to actually help us build and put this experience on, which is really exciting. And I think I've got a video of a little gravel ride teaser, if you will. Gravel day it will be challenging for sure, but it is more like hiking than anything else, and so I've started gravel riding recently, and it's been a really fun experience for me. And I think what we're hoping to see, and we're really starting to see from people registering, is it's bringing an entirely new community into the Pelotonia community that ultimately is raising more money, all for sort of our one goal and our one cause. So we're excited about this year, and I think with that, I am happy to take any and all questions that you might have.
Is an e-bike an electric bike? Is that what is an e-bike?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. So the question was, are e-bikes electric bikes? So that's exactly what they are. There's a lot of different styles of e-bikes, and so there's, class 1 and class 2 e-bikes, which are basically the size of the motor. So some of them are pedal assist, where you have to pedal to actually gain sort of the motor benefit, all the way up to e-bikes that have a throttle and you can, it's more like almost like a motorcycle, if you will, a small motorcycle. So what we've seen a lot of is the pedal assist, where people still work out, you still need to put some work into it, but instead of maybe being able to ride 8 miles on your normal bike, with a pedal assist bike, you can get through 25 miles and feel just as good and accomplished and get to experience things with people.
How is a gravel bike different than just a mountain bike? Or are you just basically riding the same type of bike, you just don't have the mountains and the ocean to look at?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. So the question was, what's the difference between a gravel bike and a mountain bike? So a gravel bike's actually like if a road bike and a mountain bike came together and had a baby. So it actually looks more like a road bike. So most people from afar would look at it and actually think, oh, that's a road bike. So it has drop handlebars, the whole thing, but wider, knobbier tires. The difference between gravel bikes and mountain bikes and sort of gravel riding and mountain biking, most mountain bikes have shock absorbers, things like that, and sort of are meant for trails and going over stumps and rocks and all of these things. Gravel doesn't necessarily have like the shock absorbers and things, and so it's built to be able to go long distances. So you really wouldn't want to ride a mountain bike, maybe more than 25 miles. A gravel bike you could take out for a 100-mile ride. And I actually I had never mountain biked, but 2 weeks ago in Scottsdale, I went on my first sort of mountain bike adventure. And it was amazing, and it was super fun. And for those of you that don't know, south of town, about an hour and a half from here, there's something called the Bailey's Trail System, which is being built, which will end up being about 85, I think, miles of private, closed mountain bike trails. So my dream is, and our team hates when I say this, my dream is that gravel ride and gravel day goes so well that we introduce a third event someday, which is mountain biking, because I think we're going to have one of the premier mountain bike destinations with this course, like in the entire Midwest soon, and I think it's going to be a huge asset for us.
Can you talk a little bit about what it's like to be a spectator? I talked to somebody the other day and they said they had never been to a bike ride or a bike race. And then also a little bit about volunteering.
Yeah, absolutely. So the question was, what's it like to be a spectator and also to talk about volunteering? So I've never been a spectator myself because I've always ridden, but I can tell you that we probably have 25 to 30,000 people that come out throughout the weekend to spectate all along the route. And so the map we showed you of the 100-mile route, there are people all along the entire route that come to the end of their driveways. They're holding up signs. There's some really memorable signs sort of throughout the ride. And then at every start line and finish line, it's open to the public. And so we have spectators. We have food and beverages for all the spectators. We want to make it a really good experience. And for us, sort of the stance we've taken on spectating is, these are the people that might be living in a house where, a spouse is out every Saturday morning training and sort of they're living the Pelotonia experience just as much as anyone else. And so we've tried to make the spectator experience really fun and engaging. To watch, groups of people finish with a survivor jersey and like the pride that people take crossing the finish line is pretty special. And so every year when I finish my ride, I end up for the next couple hours just standing at the finish line and clapping for people because people are doing something that's challenging for them and it's not easy and it's hard and they're doing it for a reason, for a personal reason. And so the pride that they have coming along the finish line's absolutely just amazing. And then a volunteer experience, so I'm glad you asked that because I sort of failed to touch on it as much as I usually like to. Pelotonia would simply just not happen without volunteers. So we have 3,000 volunteers every year that show up on the weekend. And there are jobs ranging from helping people with their bikes to making peanut butter and jelly to pouring beer to emptying trash cans and sort of moving things from A to B. And it's an amazing way to come experience the event, be a part of the event, but not need to throw on a bunch of spandex and ride on a road bike for the weekend. And so our shifts are typically 4 hours, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, in all parts of the route. So we've got, volunteer shifts from Columbus all the way up to Gambier and Kenyon. And it's a great way for people to come experience. One of the things we're doing this year that's new for the volunteers is actually giving them space on their volunteer t-shirt to share why they're volunteering. And what we've learned over the last couple of years is there's so many great personal stories buried in with these volunteers who aren't wearing a Survivor jersey or might not be wearing a corporate, t-shirt to show what team sort of they're a part of. But the amount of survivors that we have that come out and volunteer just quietly and don't have necessarily the opportunity to share their stories, pretty remarkable. So this year, all the volunteers will be able to share sort of why they're participating.
It's kind of a tough question, but you seem to be pretty deep in the research area, so you might know. How much funding is there for prevention studies around nutrition, pollution, environmental factors, that sort of thing?
Yeah, that's a great question. So the question was how much funding, how much research is happening in sort of prevention, nutrition, environmental factors. So I can tell you there's a lot. My oncologist, John mentioned I had cancer 15 years ago. My oncologist is actually on the FDA nutrition pyramid panel. And so there's a ton of research happening on the nutrition side, and specifically nutrition related to prevention. I'd be happy to sort of pull up some of the projects we've done so you could share them with the group if that's something you'd be willing to do. But a couple of years ago we funded a really fun study about blackberries. There's things about tomatoes. There's sort of that is sort of a wide open arena, and it's gaining more and more traction now as I think living sort of a holistic well-being lifestyle is just seems to be coming more to the forefront of just general media and people's general attention. There's also a lot of research happening around sleep. And then environmental factors. There's so many environmental factors. And I think I've heard some of the oncologists and researchers sort of say, when you think about pediatric and adolescent cancer, and so adolescent cancer, thinking, about up to 18. I grew up in a house where we had a pediatric cancer patient, my sister. Pediatric and adolescent cancer is the result of bad luck. It is not the result of environmental factors. But as we age and get older, most of the cancers are actually environmental factors, they believe. And so there's a lot of research happening into what is that, what are those. I was in my early 20s and probably sat in the bad luck camp still. But there's a lot of really interesting stuff happening in that world.
Along those same lines, can you tell us anything about how artificial intelligence is going to start impacting cancer research?
Yeah. I listened to a podcast yesterday on my drive from Cleveland about AI and ChatGPT and all of that stuff. I have not had any specific conversations with the researchers recently on AI. One of the really big movements happening in research right now is big data. And so what they're realizing in sort of the easiest way to think about it is like on a clinical trial level. Clinical trials are all about gathering data. And the James is in support with Pelotonia is actually kicking off one of the country's first telemedicine clinical trials. So most clinical trials up today, you have to drive and you have to be present to be a part of the clinical trial. And I think with the telemedicine movement over the last couple of years, they're now opening up clinical trials to be done through telemedicine, which just broadens the landscape and the reach that you can have from a clinical trial standpoint. With that, they're realizing how important big data is in data analytics and computer scientists. And so a lot of the fellows that we're funding now, a lot of them actually come from computer science. So there's a lot of computer science students that are starting to get really interested in the world of cancer research and realizing they can apply their talents with AI, with big data, with analytics and things like that to something that they wouldn't have thought of as sort of being traditional, traditional career path for them, and that's really exciting.
On a less serious note, Joe, has our own Dwight Hurd been one of your most experienced senior writers in Pelotonia?
For many, many years. We took a picture together earlier, so I've actually never had the chance to meet and shake Dwight's hand, but since the day I started at Pelotonia, I have heard about Dwight being our most tenured in life rider, most experienced rider. But I actually, I'll share a funny story. There's a woman, she lives in Grandview, her name's Heidi Card. She has green, sometimes purple hair. I'm looking at you because I feel like you might remember this story. I think you ran into her at a coffee shop. And she had a chance, she had ridden a little bit with Dwight in the event the prior year. And Heidi started explaining that her favorite moment of Pelotonia last year was meeting this guy, an older gentleman who she didn't grab his name. But she was so impressed with him, so inspired by him, and it happened to be she was talking to you, and it was your husband. And so I think you went into the coffee shop and got introduced and took a picture, but you know, he's a legend. And so we're...
One little aside, in 2008 or 2007 or 2008, Dwight and Mitch and I were on a ride in Prospect, and a guy rode up on his bike and was asking us about the routes. He was, you know, where could you go if you came here and rode this way, and what about this? It turns out it was the founder of Pelotonia, Mike Caligiuri.
No way.
And so he was telling us about his vision, and we just couldn't believe it. I mean, but look where the ride is today.
That's
So
amazing.
we kind of got an insight on the ride a little bit before the ride actually began.
Yeah, no, that's cool.
I got to add to that. Mike Caligiuri, who was with Ohio State University in the medical section, he had come from Boston. And in Boston, there's a ride that takes place every year. And he described to us how they raised $30 million in 1 year. And he was going to do that in Columbus. As we rode out, I turned to Mitch and I said, that guy is crazier than hell. We were in Springfield at a fundraiser for Pelotonia, and I went up and told Mike that story. So he made his presentation, then he said, Dwight, come up here and tell the story, clean it up. I used some foul words. So I got up and told the story, and that is the worst mistake and the wrongest I've ever been in my life. And thank God that Caligiuri and others like you have done what you've done. It's just amazing.
Yeah, thank you.
You said you set out to raise 35 million. It's kind of a random number. What was the significance of the 35 in the first 7 years? Why not 50 or 20?
Oh, that was their original business plan. So back in 2007, 2008, they wanted to raise 35 million over the first 7 years. I don't know what the origin of that was, other than probably needs and what they thought they could sort of maybe raise. Then obviously the community showed up like no one ever thought, and yeah, ever since.
I just have one other question. If 100% goes to cancer research, who pays for the promotional materials and all of the stuff that...
Yeah, great question. So that's the those logos that I showed earlier. Those corporate foundations are the ones paying for sort of the event costs. You know, our staff. We have 17 full-time staff. The marketing, the promotions, everything you see. And you know, in the last couple of years, that has been just so critical, because just I'm sure all of you are seeing in all different areas of your life, costs for things are going crazy and labor is hard to find. And so we're super fortunate and super lucky to have great partners.
Have you explained how much you raise for different, it looks like you raise more to ride longer? And then
Yeah.
If you do the gravel, is that two different, you
Yeah.
can't do both?
You can do both.
Yeah.
You can do both. So I don't know if they had them on the slides or not, but to ride 24 miles is a $1,250 commitment. And so that's one of sort of the foundational elements that Dr. Caligiuri, took from his experience up in Boston was, cycling is interesting when you compare it to something like a marathon. So if anybody's ever been down to spectate the Columbus Marathon, it's like this amazing spectacle. There's 30,000 people that ride. But when you throw bikes in the mix, your capacity becomes an issue. And so one of the ways this ride in Boston learned to sort of deal with capacity issues and also balance of driving fundraising, because that's what we're here to do, is to actually have fundraising commitments. And so this is a commitment that when you sign up to register, you put your credit card down. And the idea is if you don't raise up to your commitment, you'll sort of pay your way and pay the rest. The reality is we rarely see anyone ever get charged personally on their card, because once they start reaching out to family and friends, sharing their personal stories, sharing why they care about cancer research, the fundraising becomes much easier. So you'll see Gravel Day, it says $1,500 on the bottom. So it's a $1,500 commitment to ride in Gravel Day. And that's also $1,500 that you can just add on top of a ride weekend commitment. And then ride weekend is anywhere from $1,250 to $2,000 and up to $3,000 for the 2-day experience. And then we've also got a $5,000 commitment, which is a high roller commitment, which is we have about 500 people every year sign up to raise $5,000 or more, and so it's incredible. So I think I'm at time. Thank you all of you for listening, for being a part of the community, for asking questions. I love getting into a room where there's some real good questions. So I appreciate everybody's just candor and curiosity, and just once again, thank you for letting me be here.
Thank you so much for that, Joe. If you could stay after, maybe for people who didn't get to ask their questions, if you have time, we'd appreciate it. Thank you. Thank you all for being here, and have a great rest of your day. Thank you.